I'm Elizabeth Steele, and I'm the jack of all trades at Hamilton Native Outpost, but I'm the master of none.
I'm Loren Steele. I'm just a cowboy or a livestock raiser, land manager.
And this is the Prairie Farm Podcast.
I'm Mark Kenyon.
I'm Dr. Julie Meechan.
I'm Steve Hansen.
I'm Jill Bebout.
Chad Gravy.
My name is Jeremy French.
I'm Laura Walter.
Carol Hawksbergen, owner of Hoxie Native Seeds, and this is the Prairie Farm Podcast.
This is Hal Herring, Backcountry Hunters and Anglers Podcast.
Skip Sly, Iowa Whitetail.
Valerie Van Houten, State Historical Society of Iowa.
Dr. Matt Helmer at Iowa State University.
My name is Kyle Laubarger with the Native Habitat Project.
I'm Judd McCullum. I appeared out of the wilderness, and this is the Prairie Farm Podcast.
Welcome to the Prairie Farm Podcast.
A lot of companies talk about conservation, but I want to tell you about a company that actually puts their money where their mouth is. Birdhuntersupply.com is a great company. I know the owner, Joe. He's a great dude. We've had the privilege of working with him, and let's just say he really puts his money where his mouth is. A large percentage of his profits from Bird Hunter Supply go to a conservation organization of your choice at checkout. So your purchase actually puts money towards conservation, and it's not just a roundup. It's not just asking you to donate on top of your purchase. This is included with your purchase. This man is running his very own small business version of Pittman Robertson, except without all the government stuff. I'm a big fan of that. So whether you're buying hunting apparel, decoys, dog training gear, you are actually going to be giving back to conservation. That is my friend Joe at birdhuntersupply.com. We love that company. We love what they have going on. Oh, and they do a really great job with their website. Makes it very easy. birdhuntersupply.com. So, Elizabeth, I met you at PFI. You were by far my favorite presentation. I'm sorry to some of my other friends who had presentations. I enjoyed yours too.
Yeah, it's true. He talked about it for days afterwards.
It was good.
Yeah.
Not only was the information like, this is what the Midwest needs, like exactly, but also you were engaging, and some of them just were so bad. You know, their information was good, but it's like, oh my goodness. The thing that I remember the most, and I want you to just start with this and tell us about it, is you said there was, from corn-fed to grass-fed, everyone wants grass-fed beef. From corn-fed to grass-fed is a nutrient difference. But if I remember you correctly, from grass-fed to diverse prairie-fed, there's actually as big or maybe bigger of a nutrition difference, jump in that. Can you talk to that?
Yeah, so this is some research that there's a Stephen Van Vliet and Fred Provenza have been working on. And so, you know, it doesn't matter what kind of, we've got a piece of steak here, there's certain health benefits to that. There's protein, there's iron, you know, whatever that list of things is, that doesn't matter how it was raised, it's got it. But then if you raise it on pasture, and the more time on pasture, the better, it will have certain added benefits like the omega-3 fatty acids and the conjugated linoleic acids. And you say, gosh, those don't sound very tasty, but actually they're quite healthy. Sometimes, you know, on a bag of walnuts, you'll see like heart healthy. It has omega-3 fatty acids in it.
Yeah.
So that's if it's raised on pasture. But if it's raised with a diversity of plants in that pasture, it actually has all these phytonutrients. And so think like, you know, why are we supposed to eat blueberries or tomatoes? Because they have phytonutrients that are so good for us. And so basically the cow or the cattle come by, eat these plants that have these plant secondary compounds or phytonutrients, and you know, the plant is producing those maybe to protect itself from insects, from herbivores, but when the animal eats them, they're medicinal to the animal. So kind of think like essential oils. You know, the reason people use essential oils is because of these plant secondary compounds. Or think like chili peppers. What makes them spicy? Yeah. That is a plant secondary compound. It doesn't benefit the plant per se, but except that it keeps things from eating it. And so when the cow comes by, eats this, you know, let's just think of her eating the blueberries. That's a silly example, right? But she eats the blueberries. That gets incorporated into her meat or into the milk that she's producing. And then when you eat the meat or the milk of this animal, it has those plant secondary compounds in it. So you're getting all of the, basic things, protein and iron. Then you're getting the conjugated linoleic acids, the omega-3s, and you're getting these phytonutrients when they're raised on a diversity of pasture. It's kind of interesting science that's emerging.
That is super interesting. I'm curious. I had a friend, he was on the carnivore diet for like 6 months. He was all about it. And he was explaining to me why vegetables were bad for me. I don't think vegetables are bad for me. But his point was like plants have things in them that deter other living beings from eating them.
I know where he got that idea from.
But he was explaining that when an animal eats the plant, it breaks those bad things down, but it still carries the nutrients into its meat or its milk. Is there any validity in that?
You're getting outside of my realm of knowledge there a little bit, but I think the research will say that, and again, not my specialty, but I think the research will kind of indicate that you can get pretty high levels of these plant secondary compounds in the meat and milk. So it's not just a matter of, it's not that you're getting only this little fraction of it. And in fact, you're probably getting other plant secondary compounds, because the silly example of the cow eating the blueberries, well, she doesn't eat blueberries probably, but she eats a sunflower or she eats a rosinweed or whatever she eats, and each of those have different plant secondary compounds. And I've seen there were a couple of steaks in Missouri that were tested at this meat lab where you send in one of your steaks and they look at what plant secondary compounds are in it. And I mean, the number and the names of these, I remember one specifically, it sounded a lot like delphinium, like the larkspurs, and I suspicion it was something in that family. I don't know that. I was jumping to conclusions. But, we don't all go around eating larkspur plants, right?
Yeah.
And so it's a way to get these plant secondary compounds that are in the meat that we wouldn't necessarily go around eating that plant. We might eat the tomato or the blueberry, but we're not going to eat larkspur plants.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of, it's kind of like the essential oils. You're getting your essential oils in your meat. I'm sure that's a terrible way to think of it, but that's how my mind processes it.
Is there a huge taste difference?
I don't know. That's a good question. I will say, I have a family dairy cow, and when I graze her on natives, as opposed to fescue is a very common introduced cool season grass pasture in our neck of the woods. And I think her milk tastes a lot better. It lasts better in the fridge than when she's on the fescue. Taste is kind of one of those things too, though, that sometimes it's, if you were raised eating corn-fed beef, that's normal to you and that's good to you, right? We have
That's a good point.
Pasture-raised steer that we're eating on right now in the freezer, and we find it to be quite good. And so, beauty's in the eye of the beholder, and to some degree taste is too. Would you add anything to that?
I think a lot of times people think that a grass-finished animal has more flavor. Now, if you're used to straight grain finished all the time, you might not find those flavors desirable. Some find it more desirable than others. But that's kind of my thought. It's sure, I like both. I like grain-finished beef. Grew up eating it. I like the way it tastes. I don't think it's probably quite as healthy as a grass or pasture finished animal. As far as what she was talking about with the phytonutrients and things, I like to think of it as it's like eating the vegetables without having to eat the vegetables, because I'm not that fond of a lot of vegetables. So,
nice.
I think it's a heck of a deal.
Trying to feed your cattle broccoli.
Lauren's mom, when he was a kid, eat your vegetables. I am.
Just straight. Well,
it's filet mignon.
I've tried a bunch of, obviously most pork is supplemented with some sort of soy or cornmeal or something of the sort, but or byproduct, and I can tell a huge difference in that when it's confinement raised pork and pasture raised pork, but it's like double the price. But with cattle, the beef, I actually can't tell taste wise. I can't really tell that big of a difference on the taste of cattle, whether it's just regular beef you get at Walmart or if it's pasture raised or something of the sort. Now I do believe you, it's way healthier. And I've tried to pay attention to how I feel afterwards. Anecdotally, I would say I feel a little better afterwards with grass fed beef, but That's not scientific of any sort. I find that interesting. Do you find a big difference? Well, I want to get to this question, but first, if you had 3 head of cattle, you're just a hobby farmer, but you had unlimited land and you could do whatever you wanted with that land to raise these 3 head of cattle.
I gotta say, I hate that term, hobby farmer, because the work is it's still intense.
Look, if it's a net loss, it's a hobby. Even if that hobby costs you,
well, maybe financially, but I don't know if you looked at what that family is saving just by not having to buy, their meat products. I wouldn't be surprised if they.
I think you'd be hard pressed raising a cow for less money than the cheapest beef at Walmart.
Yeah, I think there's truth to that, but I think if you looked at, there'd be effects on your behavior that would cause you to save money in other places, and I think the number one thing would be less eating out, because you feel like I have this super valuable thing in my freezer that I spent all this time and effort on raising.
What about nutritional farmer? I do it for my own nutrition. So not hobby, but you're not doing it for a living. It's just
I think just call him a farmer.
I thought he was just going to say it was all the savings on entertainment because...
well, that too. I mean, you can't go on vacation, so...
But if you had the perfect setup, because... Yeah, what would your pastures look like? Would you have them on one lot? Would you rotate them? What would you do with just 3 head of cattle farming?
So, I mean, you get better grass management when you... Let me boil it down to this. We want to mimic Mother Nature, right? Because if we're mimicking Mother Nature, that's a more natural system. And so when we had the bison out here on the prairie and the elk out here on the prairie, they took and they rotated themselves through the land. So on the native grasslands, and there's a lot, we don't know about the native grasslands back before European settlement, but, you basically had these huge herds of animals that are migrating across the prairie. You would have fire and you would have predators that are influencing the movement. And so, if the wolf pack is over here...
That's a great point, the predator aspect of it.
Yeah, and you can look at the Serengeti. And, you don't want to hang out near the lions too long, right?
Yeah.
Just go ahead and migrate on through there. And so you've got not only climate things, but you've got the predators, you've got the fire. Wherever the fire has burned the grassland is more nutritious the following year. And in fact, there's a whole style of grazing called patch burn grazing. And that's what they do is they take a third of it roughly and they burn that third. And then the animals, they have access to the whole thing. They will come over here to that third and spend their time there. And then next year you burn another third. And they'll spend most of their time in that third, but they'll go back to last year's burn somewhat. And then the third year, you burn the third. And, the longer since it's been burned, the less time they spend in it.
Interesting.
And so the bison would follow, the fire pattern around some. And where it was grazed heavily last year, it might not burn during the winter, right? Because there's not as much fuel there.
Yeah.
And so those are all just factors. We're looking to mimic that, right? And so we need to, if they can come, how asparagus is real tender and that's how everybody wants it. Nobody wants the woody one, right? And so it's kind of like if our cattle have the choice, they always want that tender stuff.
Yeah.
And they just keep going back to that and they'll graze it to where, they're grazing down this plant and this one, they're not grazing at all. And so this one's getting tough and woody. This one's young and tender, but we keep draining this one's root reserves.
Yeah.
So we need some sort of management to keep them from doing that. Historically, it was that fire. It was those predators. And so we can do that with rotational grazing. There's some new technology out. We haven't tried it yet, but we're kind of anxious. The collars. So they have collars for cattle.
So is a collar, because I know a small animal, a goat and a sheep, right? You can give them a good zap cows are like 2,000 pounds. What the heck? How's a little collar gonna, keep them at bay?
Electric fence. I mean, we can put a one-strand electric fence across here, and if they're trained to it, they got to understand what it is. It's not going to constrain them as far as they can walk right through it if they want. It's a psychological barrier.
Yeah.
Because they know, oh, that thing bites. Don't touch it. And so basically with these collars, it will tone them and say, hey, you're getting close to your boundary. And it just makes a little noise. And then they get too close and it gives them just a mild electric shock like a hot wire fence would. I've been shocked by a hot wire fence. It doesn't feel good, but it doesn't kill me. I don't like it. But it hasn't killed me yet.
Yeah. Look, like you were saying, you got to find some pastime and entertainment.
Right.
When you tell her the fence is off, it really needs to be off.
Really needs to be off.
I've experienced
that sounds like a story.
When it wasn't off and she really doesn't like it.
You ever come across a really weak one and you're standing next to it or something brushed up against it. Man, my leg is just feeling really weird right now. What's going on? And you're like, oh, it's just like a really old weak.
Man, so you're doing the collars.
We're thinking about it. We don't have any yet, but it's something we'd like to try at Hamilton Native Outpost because we have some cattle. We're wanting to try it with the cattle right now.
Yeah.
We have cattle and we have bison, but we think
no way it works with a bison.
We don't know if it.
You'd have to put it on him as like a calf, and I feel like.
Well, you got to keep making it bigger as they get bigger.
How would you?
So, I mean, we work the bison. We don't want them to get sick, or if they are sick, we want to be able to take care of them, and so we do work the bison. We have them up in a head chute. You would just do it then.
Okay, a head chute. Okay, let's hear the process on this because that fascinates me. How do you get hands on a live bison?
Yeah, you need a head chute. We've basically got something restraining them.
Do you kind of bucket train them into the chute, or what do you do?
No, so we use low stress stockmanship. That's our whole thing. And so basically, if I keep scooting closer and closer to you, at some point you're kind of like, this girl's kind of weird. I think I should move away from her.
Yeah.
And so you have this little bubble around you. And so basically, if I want you to kind of walk towards the door, I can probably edge you that way. And so it's kind of the same thing with
just kind of get in their bubble, but not so aggressively that they're in a fight response.
Right. We're not wanting them to, feel like the wolf is going to eat them right now. Right. But basically, we're kind of working out there on the edge of that bubble, and we pressure and release.
Yeah.
And they're like, "Oh, you're coming towards me. I'm going to step away."
So does that take hours to slowly manipulate them with their own bubble to get them somewhere?
I mean, it can. You're the stockmanship guy. Let's let you answer that.
You might take some amount of time and training once they kind of know what you're doing. It depends on how they've been handled in the past. A lot of times, if they've been handled really rough, if you bought these animals in and they haven't been handled with this type of handling before, then they're very wary of what you're going to do. Mm-hmm. But if you're consistent in how you handle them, they will catch on pretty quickly. And it's just like you and I having a conversation. They know what you're asking and they'll do it. They're very sensitive. Bison themselves are very sensitive animals, so they'll move quite easily.
Interesting. They're not like goats. They're not buttheads about it.
I mean, goats. That's all in training too. So we've got several thousand head of goats. Her and I do. This is separate from the seed company, but they don't all handle like that. The people, I call them hobby people's goats or pet goats a lot of times that are used to running to the feed bucket constantly. They can be very difficult to handle, but our goats are out in the pasture, and it's not that we don't handle them, we do, but we're not like baiting them around with feed. We don't go out there and pet them, and so they react to you very well. They herd really well.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Have you ever had a real sketchy bison moment when you're trying to round up to...
Her brother is the one that does most of the bison handling, and I think he's had several of those kind of sketchy moments.
Couple dust ups with them.
The bison are, they're not nearly as domesticated as cattle or sheep or goats or any of these things, and so they are, you can handle them. You can use low stress stockmanship on them, and a lot of people don't do that. They're always handling them from a machine, and then anyway. I guess there's pros and cons to a lot of different things, but if you're a good stockman, like they will respect you and you respect them too. Like it's a two-way street. So
interesting. Yeah. I am not texting, by the way. I've had so many questions pop up for you I keep not asking them, so I need to start writing them down. Otherwise, I'll forget them. Do you think that America, in the Midwest specifically, Kent and I feel like there's too much corn and beans on the ground in Iowa for our own health's sake. We've been really clear. We're not 100% against corn and beans. We just have too much.
Yep.
Could we rip up 20% of the land and put it in prairie and have practical use of grazing, even if it's not intensive grazing, but just have some use out of grazing? Because I feel like it's more palatable if we say, hey, we need to take some of this out of corn and beans, if people feel like they're producing something on it. You know, whether they're raising sheep and goats, or they've got giant chicken pastures, or pork, or bison and cattle. Do you feel like that would actually work? Like there'd be a market, people would actually want it and be willing to pay the extra 30% or whatever it is for beef when it's raised pasture wise?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question. I think that, you know, like we went and visited some friends in Maryland, and they actually have a chick rental business. Now, I can't do that in my neighborhood. Like, there's not enough people. They had like 100, 200, 300 people renting chickens, little chicks for a week. And I mean, it's a great deal because then this family can take the chick home. They get to experience farm life in a little bitty way. And in a week, they bring the chick back when it's getting noisier and messier.
That is interesting.
Then, yeah. So now, again,
in my neck of the woods, livestock for a week. So that sounds like.
Yeah, and they're paying you. Yeah, man, that's like a Nicolas deal right there. That's crazy.
Yeah.
So I do think there's a customer set that's very concerned about health. There's a lot of concern, you know, just even outside of just ignoring my agricultural friends. If I listen to other friends, they're like talking about nutrient density in their food and this sort of thing. And I think grassland agriculture can get us a lot more nutrient dense food than, you know, raising our animals where they don't have access to the land and all these diversity of plants and all of this, right? So I do think there's a set of customers that is willing to pay for it. You want to add anything to it?
I think one of the big things I think of that is the health that would add back to the land, and in turn back to us eventually in that whole process. But I'm not here to harp on other farmers and ranchers, but the way that we conventionally grow corn and soybeans is probably not real healthy on the land. I mean, just observations driving up here today at the soil erosion in a lot of the fields it's kind of appalling to me. And a lot of those fields were highly sloped fields, you know, like going back to what you said, maybe we just take out some of the more marginal ground and put that back into grassland agriculture. And I sure think there's opportunity there. And right now, in particular, the commodities are not very good. Corn and soybeans are not been great. No. You know, it's been a pretty tough several years in a row here. Yeah. If you're in the commodity business on the corn and soybeans, but beef has been really good.
Oh yeah.
It's kind of surprising to me that we don't see more of it going back that direction. But a lot of times, well,
they sold all their equipment 20, 30 years ago. Or
the fences are gone, the equipment is gone, the knowledge is gone a lot of times. These guys, they don't know, they don't have the animal agricultural knowledge anymore. And so, but it offers opportunity for young people that want to get into it, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I give Riley tons of props. They didn't have cattle when he was growing up. He went out, and there's a bunch of research on cattle. You can find it all over the place. Well, he just said, I'll do bison. Well, the research on bison's like you guys and Colin Bob Jackson. And there's one other YouTuber that he says does a lot with bison. And so he just went in with that. But I do think there is a lot of opportunity for it. So you guys know Bob Jackson, I'm sure, right?
I don't know.
Oh my goodness. He's in southern Iowa. He's got like 300 head of bison.
Okay.
By Promise City, Iowa. You should look him up.
I bet your brother knows him.
He might.
He's been around forever.
He's quite a bit older, and he
grazes his on prairie as well.
Oh, nice.
He does a great job, and he said he had a neighbor who was tilling the side of a hill, like basically plowing it.
He had to go, from the bottom to the top, and he would plow down. It was too steep to plow up the hill, and he'd have to, after he got back down, he'd have to trolley around to the other backside of the hill, and then come back down.
And Bob was like, "Hey, what are you doing here? What do you got going on?" He's like, "Well, my corn and bean field at the bottom of the hill, all the soil eroded away. So if I plow this up, the soil will erode back down." And I was like, that is the most short-sighted fix I've ever seen.
Unsustainable agriculture.
Yeah, what is that? Oh man. But yeah,
nightmare. It's a crime against the land is what that is.
The prairie business kind of took over from my dad, and what he could handle, especially when he started doing more forbs. But he told me several times he missed doing cattle and he really wanted to get bison, but it was the fencing, right? The price of the fencing was just kept him out of the game. And but he told me that, and now I've been trying to get the team to get on board with like goats and sheep.
Yeah, I guess doesn't have room in their schedule to go chase goats and sheep.
Yeah, no way. I wouldn't have time. But I'd rent them and take pictures with them and then send them back. But your dad was kind of a legend as well. Was he the one who originally started Hamilton Native Outpost?
So both of my folks, my mom and my dad, started the seed company. So they both worked for what's now NRCS. It was the Soil Conservation Service back in the day. And were going to move my dad's job up to Northwest Missouri. And they decided they didn't want to move to Northwest Missouri. He's an Ozark boy through and through. Yeah. And so there was a lot of interest in the warm season grasses for grazing at that point. And so and this would have been back in like 81, I think is when they say they first started the business, 1981. So they started harvesting warm season grass seed. And then, it just kept growing from there. They started like being out on the prairies and seeing these wildflowers. And they're like, those are kind of cool. What's that? And so then they, get an identity. Oh, that's a pale purple coneflower. And so then they start hand picking that. And, it all just grew from little bitty quantities to, we still do some things hand picked, little bitty quantities. And those are, of course, valuable. And everybody looks at it like, wow, that's really expensive. I'm like, wow, do you realize how much work went into that?
Yeah, we're just trying to, I know it says $1,000 a pound. We're just trying to break even. That's break even cost.
Yeah, I grow wild strawberries, native wild strawberries, and the labor in that is just unreal. Yeah. You're down on your hands and knees, crawling through wild parsnip and everything else that wants to grow in there with them.
Hard to keep yourself from eating them, too.
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
Especially he's got like, so when he says the labor in it, he's got his little kids out there picking strawberries.
Yeah. Well, his job is to make not sure my two youngest. Those two are two little black bears. They'd clean me out if I cut them loose on the berry patch.
But it's literally like you start doing the math on break even. It's like $1,100 an ounce on the wild strawberries. You know what I mean? And that's tough to. But we want them. We want to be able to have them.
Yeah, they're an important part of the prairie, yeah.
Especially we do a lot of like backyard prairie stuff, right? Where people are buying a quarter acre and stuff like that. And I want for people to be able to have them in there because I think the emotional connection with their prairie people would have if they started getting food out of it would be it would change the Midwest. And so if we could start being like, no, you could physically have some food out of this and it's some of the best tasting food you could find anywhere. I think that would really go a long ways, but
and I think to add to that, we do make some Hairy Mountain Mint ice cream. Well, that's pretty tasty stuff, right? So he doesn't like mint, so he thinks it's terrible, but the rest of us all think it's wonderful.
Would that be better than like common mountain mint? Could you use? We don't have Hairy Mountain Mint.
Yeah, the hairy for us is the best.
You just grind up the leaves? Is that what you do? Or?
I'll take the leaves and steam
after
some
seed
milk
cleaning or something.
Well, usually I just go, pull some
off,
raw off this time of year before they bloom or something. Yep. And I'll steam the milk and put some of the leaves in there. And so then I'll, get it to almost boiling and then cool it and take the leaves out, and you've got
Wow.
very
Caitlin,
minty flavored.
Caitlin, take notes on this, please. that sounds sounds
Caitlin,
awesome.
could you send some to work with Kent?
That sounds awesome. I love mint ice cream.
Does.
But then too, like from the beef perspective or the bison, whatever kind of meat you want to eat, if we can also help people to see that, yeah, you can eat the wild strawberries and Hairy Mountain mint ice cream, but if you can eat beef that is raised in a way that's consistent with, loving prairie, then how much better can that get? Instead of, and again, not trying to pick on somebody that raises corn and soybeans. We need some, right? But instead of that sort of monoculture situation, we can have a polyculture out here that's so much better for the livestock. It's so much better for the soil health.
Yeah.
It's so much better for the wildlife. And those things can all coexist instead of just having our corn production or our soybeans.
Said. Well said.
Well, so with your mom and dad, what did their neighbors think? I feel like their neighbors had opinions when they were the first 10 years when everyone thought they were crazy.
One of the good stories I've heard, the local mail lady, she told me there one time, she's like, yeah, I'd watch your parents and they'd be out on the roadside like picking, some seeds in Missouri. We can pick them for our own use, but not to sell. So back in the day when you're trying to get it ramped up, they would be out there like picking these, and they've got us kids sitting out there on a picnic blanket or something. This is not a busy highway or anything. And she's like, I'd see them around, and she'd think, what are these people doing? And then she said, now I look at all these barns, and it's like, oh my goodness, they've really built something. And so, it is, people don't know the native plants necessarily. We're in a really rural area. There is an appreciation for them more and more, I think, from the forage perspective, like using big bluestem or Indian grass. A lot of people are just using monocultures. I think they could be better with polycultures, like let's plant 40 species or something for our cattle instead of just 2 or 1.
Yeah.
But yeah, so not a huge set of knowledge, but everybody likes the pretty blooming fields. And so it's kind of a, it's changed over the years, but still kind of the same.
One of the things we went down to, I guess it would technically be northern Missouri this last November, which as a deer hunter was a lot of fun. I think Nick got to see his first rut action. He's not a hunter, but
not a hunter.
Remember that buck?
I could never forget that, brother. I could never.
That's pretty cool, wasn't it? We stopped the truck.
It was kind of horrifying.
Stopped the truck in the middle of the highway to watch, but
that's because Kent yelled at me to stop the truck.
It was
Don't
awesome.
make me sound like a weirdo.
But a weirdo. Come on now. One of the things I noticed was like how many fence rows were left. And I guess what we would generally classify historically as hedgerows, how much timber around the edges. To me, from what I've seen and heard about, it almost reminded me of Iowa. What Iowa was more like when I was growing up as a kid, but also 50, 60 years ago, what Iowa was probably like, which leads me to think there has to be quite a bit more remnant prairie intact in Missouri than what we have here in Iowa. I think in Iowa we're 0.01% of our
less than 0.01%.
Original prairie is left. Is any ideas on that for Missouri as far as how much is left versus? I mean, you guys obviously are like us. You're working in the prairie reconstruction business, but is there quite a bit of remnant seed sources still around in Missouri?
I mean, you can find, sometimes, and especially we're North Missouri's, we're a little further from North Missouri. We spend more time in Western Missouri. And, there are some remnant prairies out there that'll be a section, so, a mile by a mile. Now, those are not super common, and they're old hay prairies, and so they've just been hayed and hayed and hayed for like 150 years in a row, which is amazing that they can still produce anything on something. They're not fertilizing them. And this diverse ecosystem, they can keep producing hay on those. But so there's some of these remnant hay prairies in Missouri. There's also like the Missouri Prairie Foundation, our state game and fish agency has some prairies. And there's some private ones around too. And so there's a few scattered around, but then it's not that. You can find some scattered plants on the roadside sometimes. But most pastures, there's so little prairie left.
Yeah.
We also get into a lot of glades, which is an ecosystem where the bedrock is shallow to the soil surface.
I've never heard that before. That's interesting.
That's Kyle Liebarger talks about glades.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think they have several areas out there where they
In
have
Alabama?
where they have like these prairie glades.
Yeah. So, the bedrock is just a little bit of soil on top of all this rock. And the plant community, of course, is way different because it's not got deep rooting depth. And so I think...
Does sage handle that well? I feel like I see wherever there's shallow soil, I see a lot of sage.
And by sage, do you mean like Artemisia
prairie,
or the broom sedge?
No, the
white prairie sage.
White prairie sage. What is that?
Yeah,
something.
that's not one that's super common in our areas. But we end up with some of the glade plants are really unique. Like there's the Missouri primrose, which is not the biennial one, but it's a low growing, and it has these huge yellow flowers that are like 3 or 4 inches across, and they make these really neat pods that roll across the soil, and they're made to roll because there's not much vegetation there because of all the rock.
Artemisia Viciana.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Lutefisk.
That's
a Swedish fish dish.
Oh,
lutefisk.
I believe you. Okay, so when your cattle are grazing, I remember, and we've been saying this on the podcast since I heard you say it, it is important to introduce randomness in your grazing as much as like plan out your randomness, because otherwise, like I bet those hay fields have selected what plants work well, because if they're haying at the same time every year or somewhat of a similar regiment, it's going to do that. How do you, if I have a prairie field, how do I protect the diversity in it? Because you said cattle will kind of graze whatever is the most
tasty at the moment.
Yeah. How do you protect that if you have an operation where you're grazing cattle?
You want to take that one?
Yeah, I can take that. Just change your timing of when you're in a certain spot. It's really easy to oftentimes kind of set in a rut and say, well, this is the calving pasture. Yeah. So we're going to calve starting April 15th every year for 60 days. We're going to use this pasture. Well, that's what'll get you into that sort of rut where you're always in the same place. So just be more random. And our operation, it's easy to be random because we do a lot of crazy things. So we never do anything the same, even if we tried. But just vary where you're at with the timing of year as much as you can.
Sure. Basically, there's always, there's a season for strawberries. We were talking about strawberries a minute ago. There's a season where we all want to go eat strawberries. And if we have all the people descend on the strawberry field every year at the same time, when the strawberries are ripe, the strawberries are at some point going to be like, there is no seed to replace me, right? And you're probably not going to pick the last strawberry. So this is kind of a silly example on some level. But basically, just vary it so that, because something's going to some plant is going to appreciate the fact you were grazing on the 4th of July at that spot, and something is not going to appreciate it. And so you want to make sure you're not always favoring the same thing.
Yeah, that's a great point. Okay, this made me think, you're talking about berries and grazing. I don't think we've ever asked this question. You guys are in an area where there's black bears, right? Mm-hmm. Do you ever see black bears feeding in prairies? I mean, we think of them more as like a timber woodland animal, but Iowa had black bears, tons of them historically, and we were largely prairie. So I assume that they spent some time feeding out in prairies. They're, black bears, sure, they'll eat fawns and they'll eat, small mammals and things like that. And of course, a whole lot of carrion and scavenge things, but they eat, I think for most black bears, plants make up the bulk of their diet. Have you guys seen any of that in your part of the state?
Not really, but so we're in the Ozarks, and the Ozarks is kind of where we kind of say sometimes that it's where the western prairie meets the eastern forest. And so historically it was a lot of savanna.
Sure.
And of course you have these glades, these shallow to bedrock areas in certain areas, but It was a lot of savanna. There were a lot of trees, but there was an understory of the native grasses and wildflowers. And so, as I understand it, the bears are mostly coming up out of Arkansas.
Okay.
And then, so they're in the Ozarks down there. The Ozarks is southern Missouri, northern Arkansas, kind of. And so they're coming up. And so they're really not in, like a lot of our remnant prairie is in western Missouri.
Okay.
And so that's outside of the Ozarks. So really the bears are not in that
They're not
neighborhood yet.
interfacing with that.
So we haven't had any experience to, know how they interface with it.
Yeah.
I don't know if that
Most
will.
recently, just a couple of weeks ago, I think there was a bear there in town interfacing at the Casey's, hitting the dumpster maybe.
Some native growing Casey's pizza.
Now, I will relay one story, and this is not in our part of the world, so take that into account, I guess.
Sure.
But this guy was a helicopter pilot, and they would gather livestock and do wild game counts and things like this down in Texas mostly. Anyway, he was flying in the country of Mexico, and maybe we shouldn't talk about exactly the legality of what he was doing there, but he was flying across the border doing some work for some Mexican ranchers. And he told me that he saw these, he said, I thought they were cattle. He said there was all these black objects out here in open, very open land. And, would have been more or less rangeland, I gather, and in Mexico, old Mexico, the country.
Yeah.
And he said it was bears. He flew over there, and he said it was black bears.
Just out there on the rangeland.
Just out in the rangeland. There was no trees around.
That is really interesting. I hunted black bears up in northwest Montana once, and this was a spring hunt, so they were coming out of hibernation. And there was very little from vegetation-wise options available. There was certainly tons of vegetation, but it's like three things, And they were really feeding on the grasses that were there was that, and then there was the glacial lilies that you were supposed to be looking for to find black bears. But it stands to reason if they've been in all these areas that have predominantly grass and prairie forbs, that they must find a way to make a living on it. It would just be very interesting. I've never really heard anybody talk about it, for the tall grass prairie region. How did they interact with that? But that's a great story there. I'm sure some of the similar species that, maybe like mixed grass, short grass prairie, that would probably be down there. That's really interesting.
Man. So I
Can we sell a bear mix on?
I was just gonna say, I was like, I wonder if bears being attracted to prairie helps sell the prairie or eliminate sales on prairie. I want to get a little bit into, if it's all right with you guys, what the different animals like when they're grazing in the prairie. But before we do that, have you messed with any forbs in the cool season pasture? Like, have you ever had any success with any of that?
Like in introduced cool season pasture or in native cool seasons?
Oh, great question. I was thinking introduced. Like, can you get it to mix with fescue or something,
Sometimes people definitely want to overseed, especially the warm seasons. The warm season grasses so we're in a very cool season grass dominated area. Tall fescue, the introduced cool season, is like, 98% of our pastures or something like that. And so people want the warm seasons because they're not producing forage during the summer months when we've got all this sun and, good temperatures and all of that.
And southern Missouri has a lot of summer.
We get summer, yeah. And so people will want to overseed that. Overseeding is always, if you want a good corn crop, you go plant it out here on a clean field, right?
Yeah.
If you want a good eastern gamagrass crop to come up, you go plant it on a clean field you've killed all the existing vegetation. Now, that being said, sometimes people will get a decent overseed, but sometimes it doesn't happen. And so I think it's just important to realize it's kind of experimental. We're doing this to see if it will work, but we're not going to bank our whole business on this working, right?
Well, does it ever make sense to like introduce cool season grasses, do you ever plant a pasture of that with native forbs?
So not so much with the forbs. That just hasn't been much of a focus. Oh, and part of the reason, which probably bleeds into your other question about what do things eat, the cattle don't eat the forbs as much. I'm not going to say they don't eat them, because they do eat, a chunk of forbs. They really like some of those forbs. In fact, there's one cup plant. They use it as a silage crop. So they like for dairy cows. It's dairy quality, very high quality, in other words, forage, and they will use it in that way. So there are forbs that they like, don't get me wrong, but the bulk of their diet is grasses. Yeah. And so that, then from a pasture standpoint, nobody's thinking about, hey, let's put these forbs with our cool season introduced grass pasture. They're thinking about the warm season grasses because that's what they need from the grazing standpoint. Yeah. But we actually, some of the first diverse pastures that we started, we were like, oh yeah, we know warm season grasses, big bluestem, Indian grass. And we're like, we know cool season grasses in agriculture. Orchard grass, I don't think we put Timothy in there. Orchard grass, we did some of the endophyte friendly tall fescue, et cetera. We're like, yeah, we know those. Now those are both cool season introduced species. Mm-hmm. But in agriculture, that's the things we think of. And we planted those all together, the warm seasons that are native, the cool seasons introduced, and we really weren't happy with the results of that.
Too much cool season or not?
Yeah, so that it's in our case, that particular case, the warm seasons never expressed themselves well.
Oh, wow.
And so because the cool seasons just come on first and then they end up taking center stage, and we just never ended up with much warm season production out of that.
Interesting.
So then we were like, oh, why did we mix the introduced cool season grasses in there? We have native cool season grasses. So, but from the grazing standpoint, nobody of course, this knowledge is not new and unique to us. It's as old as the prairies are. Right. That the bison used to graze this sort of stuff. The elk used to graze this sort of stuff. But we've kind of lost that knowledge. So we mixed the native warm season grasses, native cool season grasses, native forbs and legumes all together, and created a pasture. And so that has worked a lot better. And I think I'm not going to say it can't work to mix the native warm seasons or native plants with introduced cool season pasture, but those natives have a history of working together, right? Yeah. And you can get a lot more diversity. I think diversity is really one of the keys to it. If you're going to go diverse at all, beyond just like, oh, it's a big bluestem Indian grass pasture. Yeah. If you're going to start mixing even just eastern Gamagrass in there, another warm season grass, or just switchgrass, I think you're better off to just go diverse, because then you've got all of these things coming off at different seasons, and it actually makes management a lot easier. It's better for the soil, better for the wildlife.
You're saying that if you either do just big blue Indian or just go all the way, go diverse.
That tends to be my take on it, and I'm not going to say you can't come up with the perfect thing, but the grazing window for eastern Gamagrass, for instance, it's a warm season grass, as is big bluestem, but Gamagrass is about 2 weeks earlier than the big blue.
At Hoxie Native Seeds, our mission is to provide native seed and education for landowners and land managers that care about their ground. So the education, we're doing that through the podcast and interviewing experts and the stuff we put out through our website. But the native seed that we provide, whether we grew it or we work with other producers that grew it, we are here to provide that for you. It's what keeps the lights on for us, and it's what we love to do. Most of our seeds grown right here on our farm, HoxieNativeSeeds.com. Oh, and if you need a little help with consultation, not sure what to put on your ground, we would be happy to help you with that as well. Give us a call, HoxieNativeSeeds.com.
So if you have a 50-50 stand of these, which are you going to show up at the perfect time to graze?
Yeah.
And so then you're losing production on the other one that you're not at the perfect time. And so like big bluestem and Indian grass, and you can mix a touch of little bluestem in there, they get along really well. Their grazing window is very similar. So that will make a good combination. Or if you want to go more diverse, my opinion and take on it is go diverse. You end up with problems when you have too much of one thing. It's better to have multiple wild rye than it is to just have one wild rye species, because those different species all have their different windows where they're green and growing, And then not everything is doing the same thing. You know, if we've got a big bluestem plant here and wild rye's all around it, and it's all Virginia wild rye, well, they all green up on the same day. They all grow on the same day. They're all shaped the same way. But if we'll put some early wild rye around that and some southeast wild rye, well, one of these grows earlier than Virginia. One of them grows later than Virginia.
What's early wild rye?
Elmus McGregori. I don't know if you guys end up with
I
that
don't
one
think
up here
that's
or not.
very common in Iowa.
And so the botanists in our state have been very uncertain on wild rye identification. Seems to really get the botanists.
Kind of like sedges.
Kind of like sedges, yeah.
Yeah, the Elmuses they're crazy. So, cool season wise, just Elmuses or wild ryes. Is there anything else that you would put in there?
Oh, we like basically any of the cool seasons. The wider the blades, probably the more palatable in general.
Do they like prairie June grass at all?
The June grass is good. It's not a huge tonnage producer, right?
Yeah, it's such a slight plant.
But it has I like to have it in a mix. If sometimes it gets kind of expensive to put in a grazing mix. But
Blue Grama's technically a cool season, but it's kind of halfway. It seems to me kind of a late cool season. Do you guys have that at all in Missouri? You
Blue Grama is not a big species for us. We're just so much, we get 40, 45 inches of rain. And it just, when you got little short plants, they just don't.
That might have been what those bears were eating on. Blue Grama.
But like the sedges, they make a wonderful addition to this.
So they
will
do
be
like
palatable.
sedges. I've had mixed responses on that, but you guys have seen them munch on sedges plenty of time.
The wider bladed ones, the better.
Okay. What about prairie brome?
So that's not a species we run into much. We do have like Romus pubescens, woodland brome.
Yeah.
But
isn't that like crazy expensive? Isn't that kind of hard to come by?
But like if you're in an area that has some of the plants, they're happy to eat it.
Okay.
That'd be where more of my observations come from.
I want to point something out. And I understand. I'm going to start by saying this. I understand the concern. There's a recent push. It's always been there, I think, to some degree, but there's a recent push to start asking for wild ryes to be left out of seed mixes because the owls on the AWL, I can't pronounce that correctly with my lazy Midwestern drawl, but the owls, however you say that, they work their way into the bloodstream, the way I understand it, of the bird dog, and they deposit random places around. I mean,
or
horrific.
They'll hit a bone and just start, and they'll infect.
Just horrific injuries. I've heard of people find them on the back of their dog's eyeball. In their, I think they can even end up in like internal organs and things like that. That's horrible. I hate that happens. But then we hear, I don't know, we've probably heard it 10 times since we've done the podcast. Man, I long for the day when Iowa has free roaming elk and bison again. Then we know we made it as concert. And yeah, me too. But it would seem that if we go the route, so when we are reconstructing prairie, and I especially think of this when we use let's go back to the wild strawberry example. They don't exist on the market barely, right? So you can't just all of a sudden everyone starts saying, hey, we're going to do 100 acres of CRP, put 10 pounds of wild strawberries. And it's not going to happen. What we're doing is we're laying the foundation for maybe 100 years from now. That we have enough of these reconstructed prairies around and land usage completely changes and it's allowed to kind of creep back out and spread back out into the prairie. But if we start switching the philosophy of no elements in any of our prairie reconstructions because it's horrible on the bird dogs, I just don't see how you can then have the dream of having bison and elk if you're taking away such a critically important cool season food source for these big time grazers. And yeah, you can sub in prairie June grass. You can sub in these brome species, these native bromes, maybe some sedges. But I think the reason I'm I'm turning this question into I guess it's just a discussion point for all of us to weigh in on, into a little sermon here. That's where I think it's so important that we have to answer the question, who's the prairie for? And the same thing happens with the tick trefoils. Hold the tick trefoil, please. I hate it getting on my socks when I go out in the prairie. And when we try to custom fit our conservation efforts to our own preferences,
you end up with corn.
Yeah.
If you're just going to
end up with a manicured
exactly
yard,
what's good for you, yeah, manicured yard and corn.
I mean, could they survive if we? Do you think those big time grazers? If we had prairie back on 20% of Iowa,
but no wild rice,
very little wild rice. I mean, do you think that could support bison and elk without that cool season foundation?
So you need some sort of so what we find, the warm season grasses are excellent quality right now here in, June? Excellent quality. Like, we can get amazing rates of gain on growing animals. So, but come winter, those warm season grasses have turned brown. And the quality has left. It's kind of like eating the cardboard. You ate the pizza back in the summer, and now you're down to the cardboard box.
That is a great metaphor.
Man, that is kind of similar to you, Kent.
Oh,
anyway,
whatever. Let's go check out your kitchen right now. You got a stack of cardboard boxes in your fridge, I bet.
Don't worry about
ketchup on them.
Don't you worry about that. With ketchup on them. I heat them up in the oven, the cardboard boxes.
So those native cool season grasses and some of the native forbs or wildflowers, whatever fancy words you want to use for them, they actually serve this purpose too. But they are they're the quality boost during that winter time. So you can get a lot of belly filler out of that brown warm season grass stuff.
Out of the cardboard.
But you need some little pizza pieces to go with your cardboard, right? It makes the cardboard a lot more palatable.
Yeah.
And the quality of your diet has bumped up. So that's what role the cool seasons are really serving, is that fall, winter, spring time frame. They're boosting the quality. And so, maybe you don't have to have wild rice, but you need something.
Yeah.
And it needs to have some tonnage to it, right? Like, you can't just have some of the sedges. Some of the sedges are quite leafy and will have quite a bit of green forage in the winter. But some of them don't.
Yeah, some are basically just all stem.
Some of them are basically all stem. That's not going to provide much forage. I'm not saying there's not a wildlife value or some other sort of value to that, because there's a lot of values to a lot of the different plants. But yeah, so we need some sort of cool season. The bulrushes make a great addition. Foul manna grass is great. And I say native cool season grasses, but I really mean native cool season grasses and grass-like species.
Yeah.
So you need some sort of quality. I do wonder sometimes and I think from the grazing standpoint, this is true too, diversity. Let's not make it our only cool season grass out there, or grass-like species, is wild rye. And it's all Virginia wild rye, because that has your bird dog is more likely to come into contact with it when it's covering the whole entire field, as opposed to if it was just 10 or 5% of the
great
stand.
Point. Yeah, that's a great
And so
point.
I think diversity can really be part of the answer. But yeah, there is that tension, like, what do you do about the things that, I'm planting this for purpose X. I want to walk in it. Well, I don't like the tick trefoils.
Right.
Or I'm planting it for forage. Well, maybe I don't want the non-palatable plants. Maybe I don't want the mints, like bergamot or whatever is not very palatable. And so maybe I want to avoid that. But what benefit am I missing to the bigger picture? Maybe even, like, as a cattleman, maybe my forage production could be better with some of those plants, because you have things like hydraulic lift, where some of the deep-rooted plants are bringing up water to share with some of the shallower-rooted plants. So I don't know. I think diversity is one of the big keys. And no, we don't have to put every species out there that is produced, but at some point you get to being too picky.
Yeah,
what have you got left?
Yeah, for sure.
Are there any forbs that you find that cattle like more than, I know that cup plant, and if you got cup plant in your prairie, you should have cattle, because cup plant get real, as Dr. Kaiser says, woolly. It gets real woolly out there. It gets thick, and they're tall, and they've got giant leaves that can kind of shade out everything else. But besides cut plant, is there anything that you find? Because people call us all the time. Hey, I'm not a hobby farmer, full-fledged farmer. I've got 2 cattle, 2 heads of cattle. What prairie should I put out there? And I tend to just lean towards diversity. They'll munch on something. But is there anything specifically we need to be making sure we're putting in there?
I mean, again, I think diversity is really, there's some that are definitely more palatable than others. And we've tried to make some of those observations.
What gets left behind?
Oh, yeah. Always hoary vervain. You ever see these pastures? There's never a hoary vervain touch. Right. They all stick. What is up with that?
Well, it's probably got really high plant secondary compounds that are basically making it taste bitter.
Interesting.
It's kind of like when you get a hold of something and you get a, whatever piece of fruit and you're like, wow,
like
that one does not taste very good.
Yeah.
And so you spit it out and think, gosh, I'll try another pineapple another day or something.
No more corpse fruit, please. What's that, durian or whatever? That's stuff that smells like rotten feet.
Yeah, so the plant secondary compounds in there are making that not taste good to you. And so that's the same thing. The vervains, I don't know what the plant secondary compounds are. Mints. Cattle do not like mints. I happen to love to eat mint plants, right?
Interesting.
And so there's in fact, a lot of the mints are actually toxic to livestock. And so, but they're not toxic to us as humans. Yeah. So different species have different preferences and can tolerate different plant secondary compounds. And
is milkweed as toxic as they say? I've heard conflicting views on that.
Yeah, so what we find is like butterfly milkweed, they won't hardly touch it. Have you ever seen them touch a butterfly milkweed?
I can't remember for certain. I've definitely seen them eat common milkweed.
But common milkweed, yeah.
They'll eat it. Right,
they don't get sick
to the stem. Now, if you put them in an entire field of it, I doubt they would do that. But when there's just one little patch out there in the field, I've sure seen them eat it.
Well, that confirms what we've heard. Yeah.
Now, it's very hard to predict what animals are going to do, and I contend that they're smarter than we are. They know what's in those things, and anyway, I'll tell a little story here. I put a pen of stocker cattle out on it was like a 200-acre pasture, and it was in a patch burned graze type of setup where they'd burned a third of the field, and I've grazed this field a number of times, probably 7 or 8 times now. And one time I saw cattle go in there, and there was one part of that, it was a planting, and there was like 80 acres of that had a lot of white beard tongue or Penstemon digitalis in there. And they ate most of it one year. And the rest of the time, maybe they nip an end off here or there, but they eat, 5% or less. And why they ate it that year, I don't know.
That is really
that was
interesting.
A put-together set of cattle that had been put together out of the sale barn, so they were not home-raised as a herd. I don't know if there was just a handful in there that were deficient of something and they were craving it and they taught the rest, or if the whole pen was a little deficient in something, or the weather that year caused some difference in the plant and they liked it. But
Bob
saw him eat it, and I've never seen him do it again.
That's really interesting.
Bob Jackson talks about, so the way he got into bison was he was basically his job was to chase down poachers in Yellowstone. And he would just hang out with the bison for months at a time. And he started to realize, okay, they have a family dynamic, right? And it was the grandparents normally teaching the young bison what was palatable and what wasn't. And he said, if you get a bunch of bison, he said, I see it all the time with cattle. You get a bunch that aren't related to each other and they get pulled in together. They don't know what they're supposed to be eating. They kind of like freak out and they'll just like mow down everything. But if you have a family of bison, they start training each other what's good when, and they do a lot better, and they kind of self-select there. That's my only guess, but that is a weird story with the foxglove penstemon. Let's go to goats. We have a bunch of people that ask about goats. A lot of people are getting goats. What do goats like to munch on? I know they're more browsers than really grazers on the grass, but what do they like?
They prefer the forbs or broadleaf plants, and they like to eat up high I mean, there's no height gauge on any animal, so I mean, if there's something they like down there on the ground, they're going to eat it too. But they tend to graze higher than sheep. Sheep tend to graze low. Has been my experience. They're very willing to graze down very short anyway. Goats will do that if you leave them there too long.
So if you get like Maximilia sunflower and towering above them, they like that, or?
The goats?
Yeah.
They don't mind it.
Okay.
I really don't have a lot of sheep experience, but what little I have and then what I've seen other people, they do not like tall stuff. I think they don't know what's in there that's going to eat them.
Yeah.
Eat the sheep. And so they're scared to go into tall stuff, but the goats seem to have no problem with it. They'll march right into something that's 10 feet tall and go to reaching up and grazing as high as they can, or walking it down and grazing it, whatever.
Interesting.
The one thing I will say too is there can still be concentrations of those secondary plant compounds that'll keep them from eating plants or make them very non-preferable.
Is there anything they touch because like goats eat everything, but it's just what order is what it seems like. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Kind of. I think, a lot of people think that a goat eat a tin can and they'll live on it and do just fine, and I find that to be very, very much of a hoax.
With like 2,000 head of goats, I feel like you would know. Well, and it sounds like you actually keep them fed with preferable things. They're eating a shoe. It's probably because they haven't eaten anything.
Yeah, and to go along with that, everybody thinks
ketchup
the
on the
fence
shoe?
won't hold water. It won't hold goats, but as long as they've got what they need, if you keep them in something to eat, they're not that difficult to fence. But there's even the same plant. So if we come along and we're grazing some native prairie right now that's pretty encroached with brush, and that's why we're there. We're trying to swing that back towards the grasses and forbs and a little less brush, get some brush control, like sumac.
Oh, yeah.
Larger plants that are at least second year growth or older, they love it. They will eat that. They'll strip the bark off of them and top kill those plants. But what comes back, that first year growth, they won't hardly touch it. Now, very early in the season, it seems like they'll go ahead and eat that too, especially after a burn. But now that we're up in June now, and I'm seeing them refuse it, they won't.
How do you deal with it then? Because that's a lot of people's strategy is goats once, it comes back, goats the second time, and that kind of kills it.
Yeah, I don't have a perfect answer for that. And I asked Fred Provenza about this one time. I called him and asked him, and he had a special name for it, and I can't remember what he called it. But, it was one of those fancy terms that he knew exactly what it was. He's like, it's an anti-herbivory response in that plant. That's how they keep from getting killed.
Yeah.
Is they have a real high tannin level or something like that.
Interesting.
That makes it not palatable.
Man. So I am curious. What the heck do you guys do with that many goats? That is so many goats. It sounds terrible to deal with all that many.
So they're meat goats.
Okay.
So they'll go into the meat market. We do some amount of prescription grazing, we call it, with these goats.
Oh, we rent them out, kind of?
Whatever you want to say that. That's not the term I use, but someone will pay us to bring those goats in and graze the weeds or brush back, and for that weed or brush control purposes, and then it feeds our goats at the same time. And so,
I don't see goat at Walmart. So who's buying that much goat meat? Because that's a lot of goat meat.
It's not your everyday, average, normal American person.
Okay.
That's been here for a lot of years. It's the people that come from other countries,
People
because
from Greece or something.
it is like the preferred meat worldwide.
Yeah, I've heard that.
And so, like we didn't grow up with it. Back to that culture, cattle, they learn from their mother. Bison, they learn from their mother what to eat. Our mothers didn't teach us to eat goat meat.
True.
And so we don't know how to cook it. We don't know what to do with it, but it is a really preferred meat. So there's a lot of cultures that want it for holidays or festivals or that sort of thing.
Pound for pound, what do you guys eat the most of in your household?
So we didn't grow up eating goat meat either. And so we really don't eat much goat meat. I've had it before. It's good. But we eat a lot of beef. We eat some deer. We eat a little bit of bison.
Pork.
And some pork. Yeah, we every year one of the crazy things we do at the seed company down in Missouri is it's a Christmas thing that you get a pig, but you have to come help butcher your own pig. And so it's a really good experience for people to like they've never had that experience of having to harvest their own meat. And I mean, they're not necessarily doing every step of it, right? Maybe you're just packaging the meat, but it's a great experience for people.
We need a yearly pig. Like we get it in January and we butcher it for Christmas every year.
Be enormous.
The what?
That thing would be enormous.
Well, yeah, but it'd still be awesome to like have it all year and it'd be a tradition and we could chant while we kill it. That was just a joke.
Okay.
Just a joke. Man, okay, so goat meat. I mean, you got to be like a decent percentage of the goat meat provided in the Midwest. You know what I mean? It's got to be.
It's not as common in Missouri or probably even Iowa, but like you get into Texas, there's a lot of goat meat producers.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
So to go with that, one time there was a fellow I've sold a lot of goats to in Rhode Island, has a smaller kill facility there. And anyway, we were there one time on a Saturday, and I bet there was people speaking 10 different languages wandering around there. And it was kind of like going in a way like to like a third world country. It was different.
Yeah,
very interesting.
They've got their chickens by the feet, carrying them up across the parking lot. You don't see that at your average Walmart,
right.
you know?
Yeah.
We all are used to our meat cellophane wrapped at Walmart.
Yeah.
It was,
My my mom and dad grew up in the Philippines. My dad is Filipino. My mom is pale. And they grew up in the Philippines, and I've been in the Philippines a few different times. And the dogs there are all scared of humans, and they run in packs as like a protective thing. Why? Because we eat them there. My mom has some stories about that, but like we eat the dogs, and the point being that like people there are a lot more connected to their food, so much so that you literally could find a dog in the street and like eat it for dinner. You know what I mean? It was so much more connected, and when you're carrying around chickens, you're probably more connected to your food. I imagine that is a healthier way to go. Not necessarily eating like dogs that have starved for a year, but in general, just being connected to your food is
understanding where your food comes from and how it's raised. Getting back to that whole concept of we can raise meat. If you don't even understand that meat comes from an animal, there's no way for you to make informed decisions about, I want my meat raised in this manner.
Yeah.
You don't even realize that the cow can graze on prairie, or it can graze on, something less healthy. And so, being connected to your food and understanding where food comes from is important.
I should have asked this earlier. You're grazing, we'll just call them domestic species on prairie and cattle and goats, but then grazing bison, which is a animal of the prairie. Does the meat reach the quality of the meat, does it reach its fullest potential with bison, and even maybe to a noticeably different degree with the bison than with cattle? When if you were to graze them both on, or not graze them, feed them on a feedlot with corn, that gives you this flavor profile and reaches this level of potential. And then maybe if you go grass fed, it's just a straight, invasive cool season grass fed cow. Is that a step down from a corn fed cow, or just a step different?
I mean, I think beauty's in the eye of the beholder. Taste is in the eye of the beholder too. I think the research that I've seen, was done on cattle with that plant secondary compounds and the health of the meat.
Sure.
But I think that it would apply to other animals as well. If they are able to eat these different things and get them in their diet, then it will be in their meat or milk for you.
Yeah, and we get the benefit.
Yeah.
So then if you go a step further and say, we're only going to raise this herd of cattle and this herd of bison on North American native prairie species, does the bison come out delivering even more flavor, more phytonutrients, more secondary compounds that are beneficial, because that is, it's lock and key. These things belong together, than what, say, a domesticated cow would deliver. Is there any knowledge on that?
I don't know. Do you have anything you would?
No.
I mean, I think it would be similar to the beef in that, the flavor profile may be more, what was the fancy word you used earlier? More robust or whatever. When they have a bigger variety of things to eat, instead of, it may be a little more, I wouldn't call a corn-fed steak bland, but, less robust, I guess. I would think it would be but I haven't, had a grass-fed one, prairie-fed one over here and a corn-fed one over here. And so, but I think it stands to reason, the healthier the land is, and part of the health of the land is having a diversity of plants, having things growing in all the seasons, this sort of thing. The healthier the land is, the healthier the plants are, the healthier the animals are, the better that meat is going to probably both taste and be for you.
Yeah.
So
interesting. Have you noticed any difference in calving with the cattle that you raise on prairie versus cattle that are raised on, we'll say conventional cool season pasture? Are the
you
calves,
mean overall health of?
Yeah, is there better success rate of carrying the term and having a healthy calf? Does the calf put on weight better if it's on prairie or anything like that? Have you noticed any of that prenatal advantage that happens?
So I'll give you the background on our introduced cool season forage, and then I'll let you tell
that'd be prenatal and neonatal, maybe. I don't know.
So our tall fescue is a cool season introduced forage. There's a fungus that lives inside this plant called an endophyte, and it produces a compound called ergovaline. It's kind of think of it kind of like LSD, the drug LSD.
Yeah. And Nick's very familiar with that.
Okay, right. Yeah, I think LSD's fallen out of favor in favor of opioids, or I don't keep up with it. But okay, so they're eating this stuff that's like LSD in the plant when they eat fescue. It causes them to run a fever. They have poor blood flow to their extremities, and so it really can impact their health, and that's what 90% of our pastures are. And so we had an experience, it was when Loren was managing the cattle for the seed company, where we saw some real impacts of that. I'll let you tell that.
Well, one year we had leased a neighbor's pasture, and so we were grazing, and it was mostly fescue, and so we grazed the cows over there for most of that summer. We were rotating them still, but anyway, they were on fescue for a lot of that summer. And we do breed our cattle for spring calving, true spring calving, like April, not February. Some people's definition of spring and mine are different.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that puts your breeding season in July and August, which is not a prime time to breed stuff in southern Missouri, especially on fescue, where they're running a fever from grazing on that ergovaline that's in the fescue. Anyway, that fall we preg checked the cows, and we had a 60% breed up. It was terrible.
Wow.
And then the following year, same cows. I was the same guy managing them, still same basic management. We didn't have the lease on the neighbor's place that year, and we had a few more seed fields that, big Bluestem or whatever, that we didn't need the seed from that much that year. We had a surplus, and so we were grazing natives. And come fall that year, breed up was 97% in the cattle. And so I was like, wow, that was more impressive than I thought. And also the calves weighed about 70 pounds more that fall than they did the previous year.
What advantage is that? Any advantage for you at all? Does that mean they'll get bigger in the end, or does it mean they get bigger faster as they're growing?
It means they're worth a lot more because you sell them by the pound.
Yeah. Wow.
So right now, 500-pound calf is worth like $5 a pound. So, an extra 70 pounds. They weren't this valuable at that time, but if you put it in today's market, which cattle are really valuable right now, we're at an all-time market high, but that'd be, like an extra $350 per calf.
Yeah. That's unbelievable. That answers a question that I really want to make sure we get to, and then we got to make sure you guys are up and on the road to get to your family function, and really appreciate you coming out.
This has been fantastic.
Been fun.
Yeah, it's just cool to there's not that many people in the world I can relate to and complain about the format of seed tags. You know what I mean? There's other many people who understand it. So
if you guys want to swing by the farm on your way back.
Yeah, please feel free. We'd be happy to give you a tour for real. But is there health of humans, health of your herd? That's a real good reason to move at least some of your pasture to native warm season diverse prairie. But monetarily, you just answered this for now for the cattle. Is there any other reason? Does it pencil out better? Does it, acre per acre? I'm sure you're doing tight math on your ROI for your cattle. Like people who are saying, hey, will prairie save me money or make me more money with my cattle? Is there any spots that it's doing it? Obviously with the calves being born, but anything else?
Yeah, I think the other thing that pops into my mind is the production. So we can produce more forage on an acre. If we have an acre of fescue over here and we have an acre of diverse native grassland over here, we can produce more forage on that diverse native grassland.
But fescue gets 2 seasons, right? It gets a spring and a fall.
It'll produce in the spring and the fall. But if we have a truly diverse native grassland, we've got all year.
Oh, yeah.
Winter really slows down, right? But it will kind of even keep growing some through the winter. So we're able to collect sunlight 365 days a year instead of, fescue right now in June. We've had a pretty mild spring. So it's maybe growing a little bit more than it usually does. But basically in the summer, it shuts down. We've got heat. We've got sunlight. We could grow plants,
longest
right?
days.
The prairie grows great plants in the summer, but fescue doesn't grow in that season. And so we're missing some of those crucial growing days. So mixing the warm and the cool seasons along with those forbs and legumes, really can boost and there was a study in Minnesota by David Tillman. And what they showed was that, if you had a monoculture, just one species, if you would plant just 16 species, your production could be 238% more than that monoculture.
Wow.
And so in some of those plots of monocultures were even switchgrass, which is a big tonnage producer. But you get a lot more stability of production, right? Because if all you have out there is, we're talking about switchgrass, if all you have is switchgrass, it grows during just this window.
Yeah.
And then you're not growing anything outside of that window. Well, what if the weather is not very good? Maybe it's too cool for switchgrass to really like it, or you don't get enough rain, or you name the problem. The bison come through and eat it down. The armyworms eat it, whatever happens. But if you have a diversity of plants, then it's like you always have something different coming off. If it wasn't just right for the early wild rye, well, maybe it's just right for the Virginia wild rye. If it's not just right for the Virginia wild rye, maybe it's right for the Southeast wild rye.
Wow.
So diversity can really give you more stability.
Dad used to always say that. People would be like, well, this is my topography and this is the kind of soil. And he'd be like, save all that information. I'm just going to give you as diverse of a mix as I can, for now. And Judd is like a true nerd. He's the guy on our team who answers the phone calls and does that. So he wants to dial it in. But I think diversity is like a really great way to go. And, in our CS mixes, people I get pushback all the time from the offices. We don't want seed box and monkey flower and blue vervain. And there's another one, not swamp milkweed. What's the other wet one that I normally put in? There's another one.
Prairie clover?
No. It's a wet
mouse
lobelia, cardinal flower. That I like to put in the mix. And hey, these are wet species. This is not but if you get a wet year or there's just one small area, and I'm not dumping it in the mixes, but I want something that can be wet, that can handle that wet. And so I try to do that on landscape, let alone with animals. And the last thing I really want to make sure we touch on, Eastern Gamagrass. What I've heard is that You put Eastern Gamagrass in it, even if you're flash grazing them through, they will destroy it, and they'll graze it where it doesn't come back. My guess is you guys have success to the contrary. I'm curious what your experience is on that.
Yeah, you grazed a lot of Gamagrass growing up.
Yeah, actually, so I learned a lot more about natives after I met my wife, but we did have...
So did I. I met a lot more after I met your wife, too.
We did have native warm season grasses on our farm as I was growing up. And a lot of that time, we weren't very good at managing our grazing. We didn't move our cattle around nearly as much as we do now. We did some, but anyway, we had some Gamagrass there, and we grazed that really severely, even with horses. And horses are known to graze stuff really close to the ground. And we were in the business of raising quarter horses there. We'd have 50 to 70 head of horses around at any given time. And so we got to kind of camping those broodmares out down there on this Gamagrass field, and they grazed it. We thought it was gone pretty much. And then I got interested in managing the grazing, and I was like, I'm going to see if we can bring that back. And so we let it set for an entire season and didn't graze it at all. And then we started grazing it again the next year, but doing it, on short duration, long rest period type grazing. And we brought that stand back. Now it is full of fescue still. It's all fescue in the gaps, and that field's still there, still has Gamagrass in it. But we were able to bring that back, even when it looked like it was gone. Also, on another place I leased, just some remnant fescue or Gamagrass that was out there in the fescue. I'm talking not a lot, just like a few plants was out there, and we were rotationally grazing that, and it seemed to be expanding in that field. Like I was getting more plants as the years went by. And so watching that, I thought, I wonder if we can drill that into it and get this to work. And so we did. And the first year after that, I never found a plant. I was like, that was 100% failure.
Wait, you drilled Eastern Gamagrass into the fescue?
Yeah,
okay.
Into fescue sod. And I could not find a plant. I'm like, well, that sure didn't work. And the next year, I found 10. And this is like, I'm supposed to be a guy that knows what this stuff is. I'm worked with the seed company. I could not find those seedlings out there. And about the third year, then all of a sudden I was like, I see it. I can find the rows where we drilled it. And it continues. Those plants have been very, very slow to develop. And so we're like 6 years deep into that now, and it's starting to express itself fairly well. There's still, it hasn't crowded the fescue out by any means, but the Eastern Gamagrass plants are still expanding and getting bigger. Just the crowns of the plants are, and starting to be a significant part of that stand. And so it did work that time. It's not something that I know that I recommend, but it seems like those two do play together okay. If you're gonna plant a warm season into fescue, Gamagrass seems to tolerate it if you can get it established, but it's gonna take a lot of time. So if you want things to happen quick, go a different route.
Yeah. How do you guys justify the price of Eastern Gamagrass? Because per pound, it's not crazy. I mean, wholesale, really cheap. You could find it at $15 to $20, but usually you're paying mid to upper 20s wholesale. And that's like wholesale. That's like when we're buying a pallet, or more.
Yeah.
But that's not the problem, because that's just a little more expensive than Black-Eyed Susan. The problem is there's like 4 seeds per pound, so to actually get enough seeds to get to grow out there, you need like 5 pounds. Well, or not 5, like 40 pounds per acre, and 40 times 20, $800 an acre to get it to be at the quote unquote seeding rate that you're supposed to. How do you justify that when it's tripling or quadrupling your price per acre?
So part of what I would say is get the seeding rate where it needs to be. So you can put 40 pounds out there, but that's probably 4 times the amount that you need for a full stand.
Wow.
So if I was going to plant a full stand, I would plant 10 pounds to the acre. If I thought that wasn't enough, I'd go 15.
And you're drilling this one.
Usually we recommend drilling Eastern Gamagrass. We have done it broadcast.
Yeah, I've heard that too. Almost plant it like buffalo grass, right? Where you got to really get it more like 1/4 inch seed depth?
Yeah, we're like usually aiming at a 1/2 inch,
Even
which
a 1/2
is
inch,
too
wow.
much for anything else,
Yeah,
basically, right? So one of my big complaints with the seed calculator, where we're dealing with those PLS seeds per square foot, and we're doing all that math. One of my big complaints is it doesn't work for some species, and Gamagrass is one of those.
One seed per square foot of an aster is not the same as one seed per square foot of a Tictrofoil. It's not even close.
Right.
And we're trying to solve that actually on our website right now, but it's tough because you have to go through each individual species. And I'm trying to build this thing where people can pick the species they want, and then they can just say a little, a medium amount, or a lot. But that would vary for every species, seeds per square foot and pounds per acre. That would vary. So you'd have to go through like 200 different species on that and type in how much, it's just a ton of work. And I'm trying to have it not take me 2 weeks to figure this out. But Eastern Gamagrass, okay, so that is a lot more palatable. $10 or 10 pounds per acre at $25-$30 is really not.
So you're looking
that
at
crazy.
$250 a acre, something like that. But you can also plant diversity with a little bit of Gamagrass in there for about that same price a lot of times.
Yeah.
When
Would one
it's
seed-
for grass heavy diversity with some forbs in it.
Would one seed a square foot of Gamagrass show up? Okay.
Oh boy. I am trying to think. So what we're ultimately looking for in a square yard is something like 4 plants. Like, because, they get as big as a wash tub. And so now if you want it to not take quite as long for them to get to fill up the field, that's when you go to the 15 pounds to the acre. But I end up not thinking about it in that. I just know that if I want a full stand of it, 10 pounds to the acre. If I want a half stand, 5 pounds to the acre.
Oh, okay.
And so I tend to think about it that way.
So
but I
a
just have
pound
to
or
go,
2 per acre in a really diverse mix would be fine. It would show up. And
that's probably a 10 or 20% stand.
Okay, yeah.
Out in the future, 10 years out or whatever, it's probably 10 or 20% of your field covered with that.
Yeah, Eastern Gamagrass is kind of like the beloved stepchild. But it's still stepchild. It's kind of weird. But.
Another outsider grazing species that I know you guys have experience with, because I watched one of your YouTube videos on it with your dad in it, is purple top or greasy grass.
Tridens flavus.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think I first came across the idea that it's good for grazing on a USDA data sheet or something like that. But have you guys grazed greasy grass much?
So it is pretty common in our neck of the woods. It'll just show up in pastures, like even introduced cool season grass pastures. It just shows up in them. Some, like especially hay fields, it'll show up in those. But
so it's pretty resilient and
if you want to overgraze it and do poor grazing management, I don't think it's really going to persist that well. But like a hay field, when we're just coming in, you hay it at just the right time. It really favors that grass species. And so, but it's really quite palatable. And what we find is that like Gamagrass comes off earlier in the spring. So you get your cool season grasses, you're grazing along, and then your Gamagrass is coming off and your switchgrasses. Then your big bluestem and Indian grass are coming off. And then you're finally getting over here to August. And the warm season, the big blue, the Indian, the, Eastern Gamagrass, switchgrass are all quality headed downhill because we're approaching, the end of summer. And so, but the purple top or greasegrass has a little window in there where it will really respond to the rain and it will put on a really good boost of quality before your cool seasons come on. So we really like to put some of these lesser known warm seasons in the mixes for that reason.
They fill in those holes.
Yep.
So it's got a lot of value to a very diverse mix. My guess is it's not your first pick for like just a single stand like Big Blue or Indian. If you were doing single stand, would you pick Big Blue Indian? Or I kind of treat them as the same, in a lot of ways. And it's actually getting harder to separate them. More and more people, their Big Blue field is getting filled with Indian or vice versa. And so they're just selling it as like a batch. But you're saying it probably wouldn't be your pick for a single stand in that regard.
No, if I'm going to do a single stand, I'm either going to do Eastern Gamagrass or I'm going to do switchgrass or I'm going to do like Big Blue Indian add some little blue in there at a minor component if you want.
You're saying a monoculture to graze? Is that what you guys are talking about?
Yeah. If I'm going monoculture, of course, I really think diversity is where it's at.
Yeah.
But
absolutely.
if I'm like, somebody's like, I don't want the complication of that, and I would make the argument that
Yeah,
diversity is actually less complicated.
Yeah, definitely.
But if they're still like, no, I need to, maybe they have a weed problem they want to deal with or whatever, then I'm like, do a monoculture of Gamagrass or a monoculture of Switchgrass, or you can mix big bluestem, Indian grass, and little bluestem together.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Is there anything you would make sure that you would tell us, do not put this in native pasture?
You're going to have to make the decision of whether or not you're going to put the unpalatable species in native pasture. Because, like the worst case scenario is, what if you put bergamot in there, let's say, and it really likes it. And now it's 10% of your stand out there.
Yeah. And they're grazing everything else, so it's got a huge advantage. And
you're just perpetuating the problem. So I think it can be a successful addition. Maybe if pasturage was my first goal with it, maybe I'm going to put it in a really minor component. So it's just kind of, I don't know, would you avoid anything in particular, like do not put in?
Ashy sunflower.
Ashy sunflower.
It's not
Does it take over for you guys, or?
It can be. It's just, its palatability seems to be pretty limited. It'll make a pretty thick stand at times. It's usually kind of colonies, patches, but it's just not one that I would probably intentionally put in there at this point. And
yeah.
Even the goats don't like it a lot of the time. I mean, they'll eat it at times, but cattle really seldom eat it.
Because they love some of the other sunflowers.
And that's in our neck of the woods. It could change, and I don't have experience outside of Missouri, really.
Yeah.
And so, we're up here in Iowa. Regionally, there could be differences that make things act different.
You guys are experts, and people should follow along with what you're doing. Where can they follow along with what you're doing?
So HamiltonNativeOutpost.com is our website, and then we also do a lot of YouTube videos.
Yeah, great YouTube videos.
Go to the field with us digitally.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, absolutely.
I've watched it. I've watched your videos before. They're excellent.
Yeah, you're like our standard for what we want. We do a lot of shorts, like, hey, here's a quick little fun fact. But you guys is like very structured 7-minute videos about what's good and what's not good. The best on prairie that there is out there. Highly recommend anybody checking those out. If you're in the southern half of Missouri or Arkansas or really any state touching that area and you need some native species, give Hamilton Native Outpost a call. Every time I've worked with you guys, you've been great. Fantastic, great service, real nice people down there. And I thank you for doing this podcast. I know it can be kind of weird for some people with 2 different seed companies, but it was really cool of you to come on.
Yeah, it's been fun to be up here in Iowa, and it's always good to know other people that are doing the same thing that you're doing in a different area, and get out and learn from other people too.
I just got a text from shout out to Juan from M&L. Just got a text from him yesterday about how their harvest was going so far this year.
Nice.
And it's just nice to know that I could share some
someone else is also having a terrible harvest day.
Well, I mean, there's not a lot of people that can relate to I've had it where I've been talking with conventional corn and bean guys, and they're very interested, but they don't know how to relate. They don't know how. Well, here's what I would do. It's like you can tell they wish they could tell you something, but they're not quite sure what to say. Whereas when you talk with another person who's doing this, it's even if you're not necessarily sharing trade secrets or anything, you're just knowing that, hey, this person knows what it's like. There's comfort in that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. We really, really appreciate you all. And you got brilliant minds. I just have to say, and all of you all know, conservation, all of this that we do, native prairie, whether we're helping with the water, helping with the landscape, helping with the beef that we eat, all of it happens just one mind at a time.